Ashli Babbitt's estate now suing the U.S. government for wrongful death and a bunch of other negligence claims, all stemming from January 6th. Now, we're going to go through the lawsuit, the filing here, which was spearheaded by our friends at Judicial Watch, and then we'll hear some reaction to some of the January 6th stuff, because MSNBC is hanging out with actors like Michael Fanoni, who, in my opinion, made up a bunch of stuff about January 6th, and pulling out the tear. We'll listen to him. Mike Pence says, hold on a minute, America. Just trust the FBI. Take them at their word. Trump is responding to the J6ers, calling them hostages, and Elise Stefanik is supporting that phrase as well. And so we're going to get into all of it. But let's start off with the lawsuit itself. Ashli Babbitt's estate sues the U.S. federal government in this filing. The estate of Ashli Babbitt, Aaron Babbitt, and others versus the United States of America. Now, they filed this in the Southern District of California, and the people spearheading this are our friends at Judicial Watch. Now, here's what they say. They say the parties, as we know, the estate of Ashli Babbitt, she was shot and killed on January 6th. Aaron Babbitt is her husband, and the government is the defendant in this case. Now, anytime you sue the government, it is a real difficult thing to do. You have to submit all these notice of claims and blah, blah, blah. It's a lot. So they give us this section saying that we've done all of that. We've timely satisfied the exhaustion requirements within 2 years. Specifically, Ashli was shot and killed by a Capitol police officer on January 6th. We filled out stupid Form 95. We sent it via fax. We submitted a supplement. We submitted a second supplement, all via certified mail. The Capitol Police has failed to make a final disposition of our claims, right? So you got a certain amount of time before you can, if you miss the window, it's the statute of limitations. Basically, you can't bring your claim. So their failure to make a determination has caused us to file this lawsuit. Now, in this lawsuit, there's some interesting things about the officer and some false reporting from this guy, Lieutenant Michael Byrd, the man who actually did the shooting and then was paraded around by the media as the savior of America. Here are the facts. They say on January 6th, Air Force veteran Ashli Babbitt, I like that, age 35, was shot and killed by Lieutenant Michael Byrd. The bullet pierced Ashli in her left anterior shoulder, perforated her left brachial plexus, trachea, upper lobe of the right lung, second anterior rib, landed in the right anterior shoulder. Ashli fell backwards, landed back on the marble floor. Video recordings show her alive and conscious, writhing uncontrollably immediately after the shooting, and it was brutal. Ashli remained conscious for several minutes and longer after being shot by Lieutenant Byrd. She was in extreme pain, suffering, mental anguish, intense fear as she slipped into pre-terminal unconsciousness. The autopsy report identified the cause of death as a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Onset minutes. The fact that Ashli was alive and conscious in extreme pain and suffering is documented in videos. Furthermore, nothing about the wound track described in the autopsy report would be expected to result in immediate death or instantaneous loss of consciousness, and Ashli's lungs contained blood, further confirming that she was alive and breathing after the shot. Ashli was pronounced dead at the hospital 3:15 p.m. Medical examiner determined the manner of death homicide. They tell us Ashli had been living in San Diego, California, where she and her husband Aaron operated a successful pool business. And shout out to my pool friends, man. I used to clean pools. A lot of cleaning pools and build them. Ashli traveled alone from San Diego to Washington to attend Women for America, the Save America rally, the next morning at the Ellipse. Trump was going to be there along with other speakers. Ashli loved her country, wanted to show her support for Trump. Now, she did not go to Washington as part of a group for any unlawful purpose. She was there to exercise her God-given American liberties and freedoms. After the rally, when she was there, Ashli, like many others, walked to the Capitol 1.5 miles. Two undercover Metro police officers followed close behind Ashli. They were all over the place as Ashli climbed the stairs to the West Terrace. Ashli entered the Capitol on the Senate side long after others had already done so. Once inside, Ashli encountered a female Capitol police officer. Okay, so she was in there, and we've seen video of this. I've not seen this video of this, but we've seen video like this, who directed her to walk south towards the House side. Come on in, waving them in. Ashli complied, walking alone through the Capitol, and ultimately arriving at the outside main door to the House chamber where demonstrators gathered. From there, Ashli walked by herself east, along the hallway outside the House chamber, then turned south, reaching the hallway outside the Speaker's lobby. Now, the Speaker's lobby is a long rectangular corridor behind or at the rear of the House chamber that features portraits of past loser speakers. Behind the Speaker's lobby is the retiring room, an adjoining corridor the size and shape where members and invited guests can relax between votes and do cocaine. The Speaker's lobby has entranceways both at the ends of the corridor and features rectangular double doors with glass panels, matching side lights, and a glass transoms that fills both to the lobby. Just outside each entranceway is a small, narrow hallway with a stairwell that leads down to the first floor. Okay, so here's an image of that. Tells us us. And you can see this looks like the speaker's lobby at the top. The doors looks like they just kind of have hinges on them. Looks like this is a stairwell railing. That glass looks broken. That's what we see. Now, the shooting occurred at the east entrance to the speaker's lobby. And this is the photo of the east entrance to the speaker's lobby. Okay, so this is where the shooting was. You know, Ashli was basically stepping up into this window frame, I believe, and Lieutenant Byrd, the shooter, was like poking around this corner right here, shot her right here, either one of these two windows, and then she fell down. Let's see what it tells us. The shooting occurred now after demonstrators filled the hallway outside the lobby, and they were all in this location. She was kind of laying on the ground right in this location right here on the floor. After demonstrators filled the hallway outside the lobby, two individuals in the crowded and tightly packed hallway, they struck and dislodged the glass panels in the door and the right door side light. So that's gone. That's gone. Lieutenant Byrd, who is a U.S. Capitol Police commander and was the incident commander for the House, the incident commander, shot Ashli on sight. She raised herself into the opening of the right door side light. Okay, so she was coming in, it sounds like this one maybe, the right door side light. Byrd later confessed, he says, I shot Ashli before seeing her hands, before assessing her intentions, or by even identifying her as female. Just shot her right away. Ashli was unarmed. Her hands were up in the air, empty, in plain view of Byrd and other officers. Ashli posed no threat to the safety of anyone. Not one member of Congress was even in the lobby, which was guarded by multiple armed police officers. There was nobody inside. Additional armed police officers were in the hallway outside the lobby and on the adjoining stairway. Ashli could not have even seen Lieutenant Byrd, who was positioned far to Ashli's left on the opposite side of the doors, near an opening to the retiring room, a distance 15 feet and an angle of 160 degrees out. Sergeant Timothy Lively, who's one of the armed officers guarding the lobby doors, later told officials who are investigating the shooting, says, I saw him. There was no way that woman would have seen that. Okay, I saw him. There was no way Ashli would have seen that. So she's just climbing through, executed. Just this dude is hanging back over here, tucked way away over here. She's climbing through this side, and he just pokes out, and you see the video, just pokes out, pop, just hits her once, boom, she's done. He didn't identify himself. Lieutenant Byrd, not even in uniform, did not identify himself as a police officer or otherwise make his presence known to Ashli. Didn't say, stop or I shoot, hands up, nothing. Did not give Ashli any warnings or command before shooting her dead. At 2:45, or within 1 minute after shooting Ashli, Lieutenant Byrd made the call. So he pops out, shoots her, she's on the ground, dying. 2:45, he gets on the radio. He says, we got shots fired in the lobby. We got shots fired in the lobby of the House chamber. Shots are being fired at us, and we're prepared to fire back at them. We have guns drawn. Please don't leave that end. Don't leave that end. What? Lieutenant Byrd made that call? We got shots fired in the lobby, his. We got shots fired in the lobby, his. Shots are being fired at us. Where did that come from? Who shot at him? Has anybody seen that person? And we're prepared to fire back at them. Uh-oh. So he's now lying that he just got shot at. So we have guns drawn. Please don't leave that end. Don't leave that end. Now, approximately 35 seconds later, Lieutenant Byrd made another radio call. He says, okay, 405B, we got an injured person. I believe that person was shot. In fact, no shots were fired at Lieutenant Byrd. No shots were fired at fellow officers. The only shot fired in this whole stinking thing was a single shot of Lieutenant Byrd at Ashli Babbitt, who she didn't even see him, and no warnings, nothing. He heard the loud noise of the gunshot. He saw her fall backwards from the window frame. He knew that he shot her, and he says, we're being shot at. No, you're not, Lieutenant Byrd. They say the facts speak the truth. Ashli was ambushed. When she was shot by Lieutenant Byrd, multiple witnesses at the scene, they just yelled, you just murdered her, because you did. Now, Lieutenant Byrd was never charged or disciplined on any of this. Never punished, never disciplined at all. Didn't get Derek Chauvin treatment, did he? No, he got paraded around. He was doing interviews. I had to do what I had to do to save America. Okay. Nobody even looked into these fake radio calls where this dude lied about being shot at, literally lied. And I believe that person was shot. Yeah, no kidding. You did it. Shots are being fired at us, and we're prepared to fire back at them. We're shooting. That's probably where that was going. Okay. Let's pause on that one, right? Shots are being fired at us, and we're what's the SH? It's probably what he did not want to say because he didn't know how to report this. We're shooting back. Okay. We're prepared to fire back. We have guns drawn. You already shot, man. You already shot, and you're changing your story in real time. I believe that person was shot. Yeah, you shot and killed her, dude. Yeah, that was you. So they say, here's the first claim. Intentional shooting and killing of Ashli Babbitt. Okay, civil claim, but assault and battery, basically murder. They say on January 6th, Lieutenant Byrd, by his own admissions, intentionally shot her. At the time of the shooting, he was a government employee. Now, She was fatally injured as a result of the shooting. The shooting was not privileged. It had no legal justification, and it was non-consensual. She's dead now. So he is liable for that. Now, we also have a claim for negligence under count 2, saying that the U.S. Capitol Police has rules for ensuring integrity of their profession and a regulation on the safe use of firearms. And both of those apply to Lieutenant Byrd. Okay, there are rules of engagement. There is a standard of care. Each directive is consistent with a reasonably prudent police officer, and both directives were in effect. And additionally, talking about negligence, Lieutenant Byrd was also designated, quote, the incident commander for the House. The U.S. Capitol Police, like most law enforcement agencies, has adopted the NIMS system, NIMS, the National Incident Management System, making it a key part of their policies. NIMS is a standardized on-scene emergency management system that they use. It requires an agency to identify an incident commander. Everyone is designated to help support the incident commander. Byrd's role as the incident commander bears substantially on the standards of care that apply to his conduct. Now, when Byrd shot and killed Ashli, he breached multiple standards of care, dropped below. 1, how about the safe use of a firearm, the perception and the assessment of imminent threats, the use of force levels like de-escalation and de-escalation of force, the perception and the assessment of facts, the use of warnings, in which there were none, firing backdrops, which he didn't care about, obtaining timely and appropriate medical aid, among other breaches that were identified in the discovery. Now, had Lieutenant Byrd actually followed these standards, he would not have actually fired, and Ashli would still be alive today. Now, they tell us that the Capitol's use of force policy, they say, unless an exigent circumstance justifies immediate actions, officers do not employ less than lethal force. Now, here are the different directives from the Capitol Police, and you can see them here. Sworn officers, sworn employees, don't discharge a firearm unless you have to. Don't withdraw it unless you need to. To avoid unintentional discharge, okay, all the directives. Now, Byrd was required to adhere to these things. Don't use his firearm, holster it until a reasonably prudent officer would do it, and all the things. But Byrd breached these standards of care. Why? Well, he unholstered his firearm before he even saw Ashli, so he was ready to go. Therefore, before any expected, prudent, or lawful discharge, he also failed to maintain his unholstered weapon at a low ready, and instead, he pointed his firearm at no fewer than 3 people. So he was just kind of waving it around, pointing it at everybody until he decided to execute Ashli. And he also pointed it at 7 uniformed officers who were behind Ashli. Okay, so there were cops on the other side of her. 7 uniformed officers positioned near her in the hallway. So why did he need to shoot and kill her if there were a bunch of cops there? Holding his finger inside the trigger guard, no trigger discipline for this guy. Pathetic. And tapping his finger on and off the trigger for at least 14 seconds before he saw and shot Ashli. So he was just trigger ready to go. Just like, let me go, let me go, let me go. Now there's an assessment. You have to make an assessment. You got to be a reasonably prudent police officer before you just shoot and kill people. And he breached his standard of care. He did not assess the appropriateness of shooting her. Byrd admitted when he was doing his interviews, he went on with Lester Holt from NBC Nightly News. Byrd said, question to him, did you know what happened there? He said, I had no clue about the person that he shot. I had no clue. I had no clue. Wild. And says, it did not matter whether the person was armed. I didn't care. I didn't even know it was female until hours way later that night. And he's just shooting off, just popping off, man. Says, instead of diligently assessing the appropriateness of actually using deadly force, he didn't care, just shot and killed her. And then lied about it. We're under attack. Lieutenant Byrd negligently, if not recklessly, assessed all persons inside the Capitol as an imminent danger to the house, even though the house was empty and there were cops everywhere. He said, when the announcement came that the Capitol had been breached, my rules of engagement never changed, is what he said. Now, he also failed to de-escalate a bunch of Capitol Police directives, telling them that you have to do that. There's compliance techniques, there's contact controls, there's cooperative controls. Like, and I understand, you know, for a lay person who's maybe not a police officer, who doesn't have all of this training and all of this heightened standard of care, you might be in there and you go, I saw January 6th. It was bedlam in there. There was madness all over the place. And so the cop had to protect the house. Okay. As we saw, right? The house was empty. Cops were right behind Ashli Babbitt. She was totally unarmed. This dude was out there just looking for somebody to execute. Then he lied about it. They're not supposed to behave that way. Okay. They're supposed to go through all this other stuff, which is why all of the other Capitol Police and all of the other people who were responding to this didn't shoot and kill anybody else. Just this dude. So they're supposed to, you know, have defensive tactics. Then it's supposed to go up. Cooperative controls, contact controls, compliance techniques, defensive techniques. Then you get to lethal force. And he just kind of skipped all that other stuff. They say Byrd breached this care. He just jumped right to level 5. He just unholstered his firearm. That's it. Pointed it at Ashli and everybody else who was behind her, and then shot. It was aimed. Look at this. His firearm was also aimed aimed in the direction of 4 officers from the Capitol Police's elite and well-armed containment and emergency response team. And they were all behind her, okay? As soon as she went down, the cops were like, oh, great. They had just reached the hallway after ascending the stairway. 3 other uniformed Capitol Police officers were also descending the same stairwell. A House Sergeant at Arms employee and other federal law enforcement officials were all in the hallway. They just wanted to shoot somebody. Like, cops were everywhere. Lieutenant Byrd also breached his standard of care. He saw Ashli in the window. He failed to apply only the level of force that a reasonably prudent police officer would do at the time. He failed to remain flexible. He did not, for example, holster his firearm. He did not even let Ashli know that he was there. He did not identify himself as a police officer. He did not warn Ashli of the consequences of coming through the doors, nor did Byrd attempt any less than lethal means to apprehend Ashli, a factor that's especially significant given that at least 4 other armed officers were in the lobby with Lieutenant Byrd to assist him in stopping and detaining or arresting Ashli, and there were at least 7 other armed officers who were either in the hallway with Ashli or in the stairwell leading up to the hallway. Indeed, Lieutenant Byrd negligently, if not recklessly, believed that rather than applying the only level of force that was reasonable, it was his job to shoot her. He said, I hope and pray no one tried to enter through those doors. He also added no one else attempted to enter that hall because he shot and killed her. Just jumped right up to level 5. Whatever. So we see here, Lieutenant Byrd was also negligent in his assessment of the facts. Byrd erroneously believed when he was there as incident commander that there were approximately 60 to 80 people in the House chamber when he shot and killed Ashli. And he said, and that was just members and their staff, right? He's like, I have to protect Congress. There's 60 to 80 Congress people and their families in there. But a reasonably prudent officer in Lieutenant Byrd's position would have been aware that, in fact, only 6 members who chose not to evacuate, including the 5 members with law enforcement or military backgrounds and 1 undefeated mixed martial arts champion. Who's that dude? We have an undefeated mixed martial arts champion? Okay, so 5 people are like, this is no big deal, okay? You're all freaking out about nothing. The rest of the Congress people are like putting on the, the Ziploc bags, like breathing out of the clear air, remained in the House floor. Other guys, this is nothing. All of them being guarded by armed officers. A reasonably prudent officer would have known that. Although 12 to 15 additional House members were in the House gallery, these individuals were 1 level above the House floor, a location that could not be accessed from this level, and they were also guarded by armed officers. So 60 to 80 was actually like 6, so he's off by a lot. And Byrd also erroneously believed that members with mobility issues were also there at the time. He said, we had a few members that are, I don't want to say disabled or, have limitations as far as being able to run or move fast. Like Jerry Nadler, he carries around like 30 to 45 pounds of fecal matter in his diaper. He's been carrying it with him for the last 40 years in Congress. Of some of those individuals who were in the lobby with me at this time of this incident, but a reasonably prudent officer would have been aware that there were, in fact, no members, disabled or otherwise, who were in the lobby at the time of the shooting. Byrd also erroneously believed that any breach of the Speaker's house was significant. He said, if they get through that door, they're in the House chamber and they're on members of Congress. But an actual smart officer would have known. The demonstrators were nowhere near the House members. They were all already evacuated. And an officer who knew better would have been aware that the east lobby doors were nearly impassable because he and others had already erected a barricade of heavy furniture at the doors. And also the windows in the east lobby were narrow and only 1 person could fit in through them at a time. So a person passing through the window would have to also climb through the barricade. And there were 5 armed officers there. And saying that Byrd, he should have known that there were 4 armed officers. And in this exchange, several additional armed officers were located at the west lobby doors. More armed officers were on the House floor and in the gallery, and additional police units had been called to Byrd's location in the east lobby, only 3 minutes before Byrd fired his weapon. Only 3 minutes before Byrd, there was a radio call. The crowd at the House main door is heading around the glass doors on the rear now of the chambers. You need all units to go there and hold the glass. Now, a reasonable officer would have known to get that equipment, but he was not aware of the phone call, I guess because his radio was off. His equipment was not on. Now, listen to this. Lieutenant Byrd also erroneously believed and acted on a false radio call and or false reports of shots fired on the House floor occurring before he left the House floor and moved to the other room. He said, there was reports of shots fired through the House main door onto the floor of the chamber. Of course that changes your posture. I drew my weapon, took a tactical defensive stance to protect myself. himself. A reasonable officer would have known their report was false. That was glass breaking, not shots fired. And you would not have relied on that call without investigation because Sergeant Paul McKenna canceled the call almost immediately after it was made. He said, nope, sorry, those were not shots fired. That was glass breaking. Reissued the shots fire call, creating substantial uncertainty about the call's accuracy. So he would clear that up. Now, Byrd could talk to McKenna and Officer Reggie Tyson and Congressman Troy Niels, who was a career law enforcement official. They all could have determined, and they all did determine, that it was glass breaking. There was glass on the floor. It wasn't a shot fired. Byrd also said, I was trapped because we were barricaded. He said, once we were barricaded, we were essentially trapped where we were. There was no way to retreat, no other way to get out because we did both sides of that corridor, so you're essentially trapped. A reasonably prudent officer would have been aware that only the doors on the east had been barricaded. The doors on the west end, which were used to evacuate people, had not been barricaded and they were open. He also erroneously believed that there were no officers present there on the other side of the door. He said, I had no knowledge that those officers were there, that he almost shot into. I had no visual or communication with them, but he still shot into them. There was no call over the radio explaining to me that those officers were there, but a reasonable officer would have just, looked. There were 3 officers that had been ordered to guard the door. They had their backs to the doors until just moments before the shooting. They were standing there. Then they moved to the adjacent wall and began ascending the stairs after the other CERT officers came to relieve them. All 3 officers were in uniform. One of them was wearing a ball cap. Now, also present was a sergeant-at-arms employee with 20 years experience, and he just shot right into them. He also thought that he was the last line of defense. He said, as an officer, you rely on our CERT, which is, our containment team, and if they don't make it there, you're the last line of defense, and it's appropriate action based on the circumstances. They say no. There were 3 other officers there. This guy didn't need to shoot and kill her. He also believed that there were hundreds of people in the hallways. He says, the chants got louder. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like hundreds of people outside the door. They would say, no, you would have known that. It's too small to hold hundreds of people. Hello? One of the officers, Officer Christopher Lanciano, he estimated the crowd size between 15 and 20, not hundreds. Now, while the second officer estimated a crowd size between 60 and 80, video of the demonstration shows it's closer to 15 to 20, okay? So this guy said 60 to 80. He couldn't get it either. But Byrd says hundreds. Byrd also believed the demonstrators caused more property damage than was actually the case. Only the windows had been broken by demonstrators Zachary Alam and Chad Jones, both of whom were clearly visible to him because he pointed the gun at them right before he shot and killed Ashli. Now, he said that he shot her to save the lives of Congress and my fellow officers, saying she was a threat. They say, no, come on. A reasonable officer would know. Ashli was unarmed, small in stature, did not pose a threat of imminent death or injury to anybody simply by climbing through a window. He said, I could not fully see her hands or backpacks or whatever, but I found out that she did not have a weapon. Shot her anyways. Byrd, who was not in uniform, didn't warn her. Failure to warn. Didn't even give her a warning. Was not in uniform, was wearing a face mask, breached this standard of care. He didn't give Ashli any verbal commands, didn't give her any warning of consequences. Nothing explicit at all. Just shot and killed her right out of the dark. In fact, Byrd did not give Ashli any commands or warnings. Any commands could have been directed at Alam and Jones. They were striking the doors. He admitted it's possible that his warning was inadequate. He says, it is possible that my warning was inadequate. He said the people on the other side could not hear him, nor could people see him speaking. I know it was difficult for anyone to see me verbally speaking because we were wearing the masks because of COVID. He also negligently just fired into the crowd, right? Bunch of people there, negligently failed to administer aid after shooting her. In fact, instead of immediately calling for medical aid, Byrd, after he shot her, he waited 1 minute and then he used his radio to make a false report of shots fired and just made it up. He then waited another 35 seconds to report an injured person was shot, not by him. The second call did not report the critical information that could have saved her life. In fact, those details were not broadcast until 2:47 p.m., much later, saying 3 minutes after the shooting, when the following radio call was made by someone else who's not Byrd. Someone else, an unknown male, says, don't know if this went out over the radio yet, which is like sick, right? She's like laying there bleeding out. Anybody catch this person dying here, bleeding out on the floor? Anybody catch this one? Don't know if this went out over the radio. We've got one civilian down with a gunshot wound to the chest. They're on the east side of the House lobby area. If we can have responding medical units respond from the west side of the House lobby, we need it ASAP. She's dying. Lieutenant Byrd is still thinking he's being shot at, probably. Now, as a direct result of this negligence, Ashli died. So we've got other negligence. Looks like these claims are being brought against these people. Now, they say all of these people had arrest authority, and all of these officers, Lively, Yetter, Lanciano, were ordered to stand guard. They were talking in front of the doors, seeing Ashli Lively, the officers formed a line in front of the doors. Lively was standing in the center of the doorframe. Officer Yetter was on the right, Lanciano on the left. Independent journalist Tyler Hansen caught up, followed Ashli into the hallway. Within 2 minutes, about 30 demonstrators filled the hallway. Zachary made his way to the lobby doors, reached over the officers, began striking the doors with the panels of glass. Zachary cracked the glass. Sergeant Lively and others stood there and did nothing to control or stop him. At one point, Zachary Alam was directly next to Ashli as Alam struck the door. Now, video recordings show that Ashli, an Air Force veteran, who had served as a military police officer and guarded high-value military assets and had high-level national security officials and dignitaries under her protection, captured terrorists and even nuclear weapons, was plainly distressed by Alam's unrestrained conduct. Standing directly in front of Sergeant Lively, Officer Yetter, and Officer Lanciano, Ashli Babbitt pleaded with the officers. "Do something!" Shouting as loud as she could, she screamed, "Call some effing help!" But instead of controlling or de-escalating or stopping Alam, Lively, Officer, and Lanciano, they moved away from the doors. They were standing right there. Wasn't that interesting in that video? And stood along the walls to the doors. They then began exiting the hallways, passing Ashli, and as they did so, new officers came on the scene: Robb, Smith, Sykes, and Brown. The first CERT officer was to reach the hallway was only a few steps from Ashli. When Lively and other officers moved to the wall, Chad Jones joined Alam in striking the doors. Ashli was in the narrow, crowded hallway. Alam dislodged the glass panel to the right door, then moved to his right, striking and dislodging the glass panel to the right through the right door side light. So that guy cracks the glass. Lieutenant Byrd pops out, boom, shoots and kills Ashli moments later. Ashli was directly behind Alam in the tightly packed space. So Jones struck and dislodged the glass panel, and then they removed the panel and placed it on the floor. Now, all these cops were there. Okay, Lively was there, Yetter, Lanciano, the CERT officers, Robb, Smith, Sykes, Browns, they're all on scene. None of them did anything, though, to stop Alam or Jones. Don't know why. None of them called for backup. They were called down with it. Gandalf, a 20-year veteran of the Capitol Police, was also there, as at one point was directly behind Ashli. Nobody did anything to try to control the situation. Lively, Yetter, and Lanciano, they say they breached their duties for not only disobeying the order to guard the doors, they abandoned their post, they didn't do anything to control or de-escalate the situation, and they failed to act and call for backup or anything. They're just standing around, like indulging in it. Like they got an order to let them in and do what they wanted. We watched it. They took Jacob Chansley around and paraded him around, opened doors for him and stuff. So they were entrapping these people. Now, as a direct result of these and other breaches, Ashli Babbitt was shot and killed, and so all of those other officers are liable for their involvement. Now, take a look at this. Negligent supervision. Okay, the Capitol Police couldn't even supervise their bad police officers, and they're liable for that. Saying the Capitol Police and the police board, and ultimately Congress, as Lieutenant Byrd's employers, they should have known that Lieutenant Byrd was a problem, and that this guy was prone to behave in dangerous or otherwise incompetent manners. And he owed Ashli a duty of care despite his incompetence. How do we know he's incompetent? Well, less than 2 years before January 6, on February 25th, 2019, Lieutenant Byrd left his loaded Glock 22, the very same firearm that he used to shoot and kill Ashli Babbitt. He left it in the bathroom in the Capitol Visitor Center, the complex. That was in 2019. They probably promoted him. I'm surprised he's not like teaching at Harvard or something. So he leaves his loaded firearm in the Visitor Center in Congress where there are representatives. Okay, you go through security so that you can't bring weapons into the Capitol so that you know you don't shoot and kill someone in there like this guy did. Like in particular, a congressperson. You do everything you can to keep weapons out of the building, and this guy just goes and takes a dump and drops it there on the floor. Lieutenant Byrd's loaded Glock was discovered during a routine security sweep later the same day. About 15,000 to 20,000 people pass through the Capitol Visitor Center, which serves as the main entrance for visitors into the Capitol during its peak season. Lawmakers and staff charged with oversight of the Capitol Police were not even made aware of the incident until a reporter contacted them. Lieutenant Byrd, his police powers had also been revoked on more than one occasion prior to January 6 for failing to meet or complete semi-annual firearms qualification requirements. The guy can't even shoot. In fact, Lieutenant Byrd had a reputation among his peers for not being a good shot. Under the range management system, an officer who fails to meet firearm requirements is given 1 week of remedial training. If the officer still fails to qualify after remedial training, police powers are then revoked until the officer then qualifies. But Byrd's police powers were also revoked for prior off-duty shooting in a stolen moving vehicle where the occupants were teenagers or juveniles. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Is this serious? The stolen vehicle was Lieutenant Byrd's car. His police powers were revoked. There was an off-duty shooting. Someone stole his car. The occupants were teenagers or juveniles, and it was Byrd's car. He fired multiple shots at the fleeing vehicle in a suburban area. He just starts popping off. Stray bullets from Byrd's firearm struck the sides of homes. Oh my gosh. What on earth? This dude just runs out like, like he's in a movie. And there are homes shot by this dude. I can't even believe this. An official investigation found that Byrd's use of force was not justified. You're no kidding. Lester Holt didn't tell us about that one, did he? He left that one out of his little hagiography report. Lieutenant Byrd also had one prior use of force matter that was originally sustained by the Capitol Police. He was found not guilty by the Disciplinary Review Board, so they'll leave that one out. But on information and belief, there are additional incidents in his background that show the Capitol Police knew or should have known that this guy, would behave in a dangerous or otherwise incompetent manner. Incredible. Capitol Police, ultimately Congress, they should have known about it. They shouldn't hire incompetent morons to, positions that they're not qualified to be in. As a direct result of these things, Ashli Babbitt is now dead. Saying here, they also want to go after the Professional Responsibility Board. In his nightly news interview, Lieutenant Byrd stated that he was just following his training in connection with the shooting. Well, that's curious because Lieutenant Byrd's use of force training was obviously deficient then, if you say that he was doing his training. The areas in which he was deficient are these: threat analysis, situational awareness, and others. And he's not following the applicable standards. Officers must also know the use of force policy. They have semi-annual qualifications for this. He's also supposed to be properly trained on First Amendment demos, capitals, security, lockdowns. He's also supposed to know how to use the incident management system. He's also supposed to be able to answer his radio and make post-shooting radio calls. But none of that happened here. All of these cops violated an order to guard their position. This guy, once the position was abandoned, shot her through the side light. Lively told investigators, one of these cops said, I grapple with this, I grapple if I should have stayed. But this officer, Officer Smith, says, I was thinking why the F did they leave? Why did they leave? Sergeant Lively, Yetter, and Laciano knew or should have known that there was another team in the hallway, but they demonstrate total incompetence of all these people, saying they breached their duty of care, and as a direct result, Ashli is now dead. We also have massive negligence, and of course, the big one, wrongful death. Now, as a direct result of all of this negligence, Ashli Babbitt's husband, the estate, they have suffered the loss of Ashli. Her services, her companionship, her projected future income. He's had pain, he's had suffering, he's had emotional distress, he's lost his spouse and suffered serious damages. And this is a cognizable claim under DC's Wrongful Death Act. And so, what are they asking for? In their prayer for relief, Ashli Babbitt's estate says that the American government is responsible for $30 million of damages, plus interests and other penalties that accrue under the law. And I hope they get it, every penny of it. Signed here by Robert Patrick Sticht and Paul J. Orfandis, attorneys for the Ashli Babbitt estate. And this was even more incompetent than I was even possibly imagining. I mean, I had no idea that this guy not only left his gun in the dumpster toilet, he's also shooting off like he's some maniac in a Hollywood film, just firing off at teenagers who stole his car from him. He's the incident commander. Maybe that's why they made him the incident commander. Nancy Pelosi's like, okay, who is the dumbest cop that we have here? Like, oh, definitely Lieutenant Byrd. The guy can't shoot for anything. He can't hit the broadside of a barn. Perfect. Make him the incident commander so that something goes wrong. And of course it did. So he shot and killed a woman. Now, all of that being said, right now, his fellow partner, another Capitol Hill police officer, is Michael Fanoni, who in my opinion is just the biggest faker, one of the biggest fakers in this whole thing. It's hard to keep track. There's a lot of fakers here. But listen, watch this moment of tears, shedding of tears from MSNBC in memory of January 6th.
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
I'm surprised Fanoni's not like laughing. Like, bro, are you nuts? What are you doing? Calm down.
Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
We are still in the midst of the same fight that began on January 6, 2021. And we have a lot at stake in this country. And I think that it deserves every American's attention.
Okay, more meaninglessness and just empty tears. It's actually kind of hysterical. But anyways, crying their eyes out over there at MSNBC. Now, Mike Pence was out. He says, just trust the FBI, everybody. Okay, FBI is looking out for you. And the people who had the biggest security failure in, I don't know, maybe American history, they couldn't even secure the Capitol building when they were counting the votes. FBI, HSI, Capitol Police, Metro Police, Sergeant at Arms, they rejected the national, like the whole country couldn't figure it out. It's either because they are totally incompetent, which is possible, or they are complicit in having this happen. And I think it's the latter, actually. I don't think that they are that dumb. I think that they wanted this to happen. They enabled it to happen. Mike Pence asked some questions about it, but the FBI told him to trust them, and so he is.
You know, I've seen the director of the FBI repeatedly assure the American people that
the
FBI were not the instigators of the riot that occurred on January 6th. And frankly, I'm very grateful for the efforts of the FBI to bring nearly 1,000 people to justice who ransacked our Capitol and did violence against police officers that day. But you're right. We've been assured again and again.
Very glad that he's gone.
That it was not the case. I just must tell you, having been there that day, I mean, to see people literally breaking windows, ransacking the Capitol, it just infuriated me. I remember thinking,
yeah, you should talk to the FBI about it, Mike.
Not this, not here, not the United States Capitol. And I believe everyone that conducted that riot at the Capitol needs to be held to the fullest extent of the law. I'm pleased that many have, but I've never been given any information. I've heard the many repeated assurances from the FBI that they were not involved, and I take them at their word.
Where is he? He's at Tel Aviv, Israel, talking about our insurrection over there from across the world. Okay, so it's just incredible. What a total disaster that guy's turned into. Now, here is Donald Trump. He says, you know, these people are hostages. They are being prosecuted and being attacked by a political opponent in this country. He's absolutely right. They are being held as political hostages. Ray Epps got 6 months for being one of the most violent offenders on the FBI's watch list. We have people who are rotting away for decades. It's reprehensible. There's a double standard here that exists. Even if you want to say, look, punish them with a diversion deal or something like they gave all of the rioters back during the Summer of Love. It's reprehensible. We have two standards. Here is Trump.
What they've done, you know what they ought to do? They ought to release the J6 hostages. They've suffered enough. They ought to release them. I call them hostages. Some people call them prisoners. I call them hostages. Release the J6 hostages, Joe. Release them, Joe. You can do it real easy, Joe. This guy, what he's done to people. And then,
yeah, it's disgusting what Joe has done. And he's now making it the centerpiece of his campaign. But we have some stones from some Republicans out there. Remember, many Republicans, they don't want to talk about this. It's actually been quite pathetic how far they are all running away from the January 6th stuff. It's like, don't you guys understand? It's not about January 6th. It's about the federal government weaponizing, prosecuting a political party, using the strong arm of the government to do it. And so Elise is out here, even though she voted for FISA and other things, talking good.
Is so important because the American people, they deserve transparency and accountability.
A lot to unpack there. Of course, the White House has said that Hunter Biden is acting unilaterally on the issue of election integrity, though. As you know, Trump took his case to court more than 60 times that there was fraud. He didn't win. But I want to get back to this key question. Do you still think it was a tragic day? Do you think that the people who stormed the Capitol should be held responsible to the full extent of the law?
I have concerns about the treatment of January 6 hostages. Whoa. I have concerns. We have a role in Congress of oversight over our treatments of prisoners. And I believe that we're seeing the weaponization of the federal government against not just President Trump, but we're seeing it against conservatives. We're seeing it against Catholics. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to serve on the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Government, because the American people want answers. They want transparency. And they understand that as you look across this country, there seems to be two sets of rules. If your last name is Clinton or it's Biden, you get to live by a different set of rules than if you're an everyday patriotic American. I've been clear, Kristen, if you go back and play the full speech I gave on the House floor, I condemn the violence just like I condemn the violence of the BLM riots, but I also importantly stood for election integrity and security of our elections, which if we don't have that, we do not have a democracy. That's right. The real threat to our democracy is these baseless witch hunt investigations and lawsuits against President Trump, whether it's Tish James or whether we see in the D.C. Circuit Court, and that is undemocratic and it's shredding our Constitution. And you know who agrees with me, Kristen? The American people. That's why President Trump is winning in poll after poll against Joe Biden.
The Justice Department has indicted a number of top-name Democrats as well, including the president's son, twice. So, I mean, a lot of critics would argue that.
So that's fair or something like that? All right, so that's Kristen. No, it's Justice Department is legitimate. Why? Because they got Menendez and Hunter? Okay, thank you for those. So, and by the way, the DOJ tried to rig the Hunter case. So don't give me that garbage. The president's son botched that. The DOJ had the whole thing ready to go. All he had to do was say yes to the judge. The whole thing would have been over. But he's so stupid and cocained out that he couldn't even get the plea deal done. It was incredible. So they tried to rig it. They were not going to prosecute him until the whistleblowers came out and started bringing some pressure upon it. But that's beside the point. Elise Stefanik crushing that interview. Don't fall into their stupid frames about 60 courts, whatever. Wrong. What's happening now is these political hostages are being treated as prisoners. And so Elise Stefanik in the House supporting our J6ers, Ashli Babbitt's estate suing the federal government for wrongful death. And we are going to continue to cover this. Now, the government, of course, will respond. We'll see if Ashli gets $30 million. Seems a little bit light to me, but we'll be here, of course, covering all the J6 stuff. And so thank you for joining us as we do. Thank you for subscribing and following along. We're going to be covering the Trump stuff, the January 6th case stuff here. And I appreciate you sharing this channel with a friend or family member. You know, YouTube thinks that we're not authoritative because we show the documents on the screen. They'd rather have some moron from MSNBC just regurgitate stuff for you. They actually amplify their content. So they don't amplify us at all. In fact, they suppress us. So your shares are super important and very critical. One great way to share, go over to robertgovea.com, sign up for our daily newsletter. When the emails come in, forward those to everybody that you've ever met in your life. Forward the emails. Got to save America. Forward, forward, forward. Great way to save this country. Sign up for the newsletter, robertgovea.com. But we're going to be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. We'll see you back here on the next one.